Welcome back to Old Saw. I'm JD Adler. Every episode on Old Saw, we do another story from the complete works, the complete fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm. As collected here, there are 240 stories in here, collected by Jack Zipes, who claims this is the most complete and most accurate collection and translation from the old German into English, 1985 English anyway. I'll leave it up to you, the audience, to decide whether or not that's accurate. I'm just going to be telling you all these stories so you get to hear them. Some of them will be familiar, some of them will not, some of them will seem quite insane. Hey, it's early 1700s Germany, baby. This shit's going to be crazy. So, let's jump right in. We're only on episode story number 17 out of 242 here. So, here we go. The White Snake is the title of this episode. A long time ago, there lived a king who was famous throughout the entire country for his wisdom. Nothing remained hidden from him, and it seemed as if he could obtain news of the most secret things through the air. However, he had one strange custom. Every day at noon, after the table was cleared of food and nobody else was present, a trusted servant had to bring him one more dish. The dish was always covered, and the servant himself did not know what was in it. Nor did anyone else, for the king did not take the cover off of the dish until he was all alone. The king continued this custom for quite some time, until one day the servant, while removing the dish, was overcome by curiosity. He took it into his room, and after he had carefully locked the door, he lifted the cover and found a white snake lying inside. Once he laid eyes on it, though, he had an irresistible desire to taste it. So he cut off a little piece and put it in his mouth. No sooner did his tongue touch it than he heard a strange whispering of exquisite voices outside his window. He went over to it to listen and noticed some sparrows talking to one another, telling what they had seen in the fields and forest. Tasting the snake had given him the power to understand the language of animals. Now, it so happened that on this very day, this very same day, it so happened, the queen lost her most beautiful ring, and the trusted servant was suspected of committing the theft because he had access to everything. The king summoned the servant and with harsh words threatened him, saying that if he was not able to name the guilty person by morning, he himself would be considered the thief and would be executed. It was to no avail that the servant protested his innocence, for he was given a curt dismissal. That seems like a fair justice system, doesn't it? Unless you can name somebody else, you're the guilty party. There's no way that could go wrong. Anyway, so he was given a curt dismissal. Distressed and afraid, he went down into the courtyard and tried to think of a way out of his predicament. Some ducks were peacefully sitting and resting by a running brook, preening themselves and chatting in a confidential tone. The servant stopped and listened to them as they told each other where they had been waddling about all morning and what good pickings they had found. But one of the ducks was irritable and said, "There's something heavy in my stomach. I was eating too fast and swallowed a ring that was lying under the king's window." Right away, the servant grabbed the duck by its neck, carried it into the kitchen, and said to the cook, "This one's well fed. It's time you killed it." "All right," said the cook, weighing it in his hands. "It certainly hasn't been shy about stuffing itself. Besides, it's been waiting long enough for its roasting." So he cut off the duck's neck, and when it had been cleaned, the queen's ring was found in its stomach. Now the servant could easily prove his innocence, and since the king wanted to make amends for having wronged his servant, he granted him a favor and promised him whatever royal post of honor he desired. Servant declined all of these. His only request was for a horse and some travel money, for he had a desire to travel about for a while and see the world. Yeah, I don't want to work for you no more, man. I just want out. Trying to accuse me of shit. I'm your most trusted servant, and that's what gets me. He's out. Some things never change. When his wish had been granted, he set out on his way, and one day as he was passing a pond, he noticed 3 fish trapped in the reeds and gasping for water. Though it is said that fish cannot talk, he heard them crying in distress and wailing that they had to die so miserably. Since he felt sorry for them, and he got down from his horse, put the 3 trapped fish back into the water, they wriggled for joy, stuck their heads out of the water, and cried out to him, "We'll remember you for saving our lives, and one day we'll repay you." They probably didn't really go the figure, since, He rode on, and while it later seemed to him that he heard a voice in the sand at his feet, he listened and heard an ant king complaining. "If only people with their clumsy beasts would keep away from us. That stupid horse is mercilessly trampling my people to death with his heavy hooves." The servant turned his horse onto a side path, and the ant king cried out to him, "We'll remember this, and one day we'll repay you." The servant's path led into the forest. It's weird that they keep calling him a servant, right? Isn't he? He's just wandering freely about the countryside. He's not really, and I guess you're always a servant, right? The servant's path led into a forest, and there he saw a father and mother ravens standing near their nest and pushing their young ones out of the nest. "Get out! Get out! You're nothing but freeloaders!" they were exclaiming. "We can't find enough food to feed you anymore, and now you're big enough to feed yourselves." The poor young birds lay on the ground, flapped their wings, and began crying. "We're just helpless children. How are we supposed to feed ourselves when we can't fly? All we can do is stay here and starve." Then the kind young man dismounted, killed his horse with his sword, and left it for the young ravens to feed on. They hopped over to the horse, ate their fill, and cried out, "We'll remember this, and one day we'll repay you." I don't know how the horse's family feels about all that, but that's how the ravens were feeling. Now the servant had to use his own legs. After he walked a long way, he reached a big city where there was a great deal of noise and a large crowd in the streets. A man on horseback rode by and announced that the king's daughter was looking for a husband, but whoever declared himself a suitor would have to perform a difficult task. And if he did not complete it successfully, he would forfeit his life. Marriage or death is the stakes. Be the prince or get killed. Those are your stakes. You can win or you can just not compete. But those are the stakes if you choose to compete. Many men had already tried and had risked their lives in vain. When the young man saw the princess, he was so dazzled by her great beauty that he forgot all about the danger, went before the king, and declared himself a suitor. He was promptly led to the sea, and a gold ring was thrown into it before his eyes. The king told him that he was to fetch the ring from the depths of the sea, and he added, "If you come up without it, you'll be continually pushed back down until you perish in the waves." Everyone felt sorry for the handsome young man and left him alone by the sea. He isn't a servant there, you notice. Now he's a handsome young man. But, okay. I guess that's how you... He was standing on the shore thinking about what to do when suddenly he saw 3 fish swimming towards him. They were none other than the 3 fish whose lives he had saved. The one in the middle held a shell in its mouth. When he sat down on the beach at the feet of the young man, he picked it up. When he opened the shell, he found the gold ring, and bursting with joy, he brought it to the king, expecting that he would receive the promised reward. But when the proud king's daughter discovered that he was not her equal in birth, she scorned him and demanded that he first perform another task. She went down in the garden, and she herself scattered 10 sacks full of millet in the grass. He must pick them all up before the sun rises tomorrow, and not a single grain may be missing. The young man sat down in the garden and tried to think of a way to accomplish the task, but nothing occurred to him. And he sat there quite sadly, expecting to be led to his death at the break of dawn. But when the first rays of the sun fell on the garden, he saw 10 sacks, all filled to the top and standing side by side. Not a single grain was missing. The ant king had come during the night with thousands and thousands of ants, and the grateful insects had picked up the millet seeds with great diligence and gathered them into the sacks. The princess herself went down to the garden and was amazed to see that the young man had accomplished the task. But her proud heart could not be tamed. She said, "Even if he has accomplished the first 2 tasks, he still shall not become my husband until he has brought me an apple from the tree of life." This bitch, man. Why are you trying to get some of this? The young man did not know where the tree of life was. Therefore, he set out with the intention of going as far as his legs could carry him, even though he had no hope of finding it. One evening, after he had traveled through 3 kingdoms and reached a forest, he sat down beneath a tree and wanted to sleep. But he heard a noise in the tree, and a golden apple fell into his hand. At the same time, 3 ravens flew down to him, landed on his knees, and said, "We're the 3 young ravens who you saved from starvation. When we grew up, we heard you were looking for the golden apple. So we flew across the sea to the end of the world where the tree of life is standing, and we fetched the apple." Now the young man was full of joy and started on his way home. He brought the golden apple to the beautiful princess, who no longer had any excuses to make. They divided the apple of life and ate it together, and her heart was filled with love for him. In time, they reached a ripe old age in peace and happiness. And that's the end of this story that is entitled, I remind you, The White Snake. Brothers Grimm. It's always weird. The next story is only a page long, so I'm just going to go ahead and tack it on to the end of this one. But, before I do that, just consider what is the point of that story? His good deeds, I guess, are rewarded. There's karma there. But what he's spending that good karma on is getting this woman to be with him through magic, I guess, like a love potion, essentially. Why? Just because she was so pretty? It's a very weird story. I don't know why. What is the moral? All of the love stories are very superficial and thin like that. There's love just because she's pretty, and then they go through all kinds of hardships, and people are very mean to each other. Like all the marriages are very to the moon, Alice, kind of things. It's I didn't realize that joke was quite that old. Anyway, here we go. We're going to do this other one that's only a page long right now. This is story number 18, The Straw, the Coal, and the Bean. There once was a poor old woman who lived in a village, and she had gathered a bunch of beans that she wanted to cook. So she prepared a fire on her hearth, lighting it with a handful of straw to make it burn faster. As she was emptying the beans into the pot, one of them slipped onto the floor unnoticed and lay next to the straw. Soon after, a glowing coal jumped from the hearth and joined the other 2. Then the straw began to speak. "Dear friends, where have you come from?" "Fortunately, I jumped out of the fire," responded the coal. "If I hadn't used sheer force, it would have been the end of me. I would have been burned to ashes." "I also escaped by the skin of my teeth," said the bean. "If the old woman had thrown me into the pot, I'd have been cooked into a soup without mercy like my comrades." "Do you think my fate would have been any better?" said the straw. "The old woman let all my brothers burn up in smoke. She grabbed 60 all at once and put them to death. Fortunately, I slipped through her fingers." "Well, what should we do now?" asked the coal. I think I'm mixing up the voices. Since we're so lucky to escape death, "I think we should stick together like good comrades," the bean said. "Also, we'd better begin heading for a foreign country because there's a new fatality." This proposal pleased the other two, and they set out on their way. However, they soon came to a small brook, and since there was no bridge or way over it, they did not know how they would manage to cross. Then the straw came up with a good idea and said, "I'll lay myself across, and you'll be able to walk over me like a bridge." So the straw stretched herself from one bank to the other, and the coal, who had a fiery temperament, marched boldly onto the newly built bridge. Yet, when it was halfway across and heard the water murmuring below, it got frightened, stopped in its tracks, and did not dare go any further. By now, the straw began to burn, broke in two pieces, and fell into the brook. The coal tumbled after, and as it hit the water, it gave up the ghost. The bean, which had cautiously stayed behind, had to laugh when it saw what happened, but it was unable to stop and kept laughing so hard that it burst. Now it would have been all over the bean were not for a traveling tailor who had been resting near the brook. He felt so sorry for the bean that he took out his needle and thread and sewed the bean together. The bean thanked him most kindly, but because the tailor had used black thread, all beans since then have had a black seam. And now you know, and knowing is half the battle, right? That was the story titled "The Straw, the Coal, and the Bean." Next episode, we'll be doing The Fisherman and His Wife. Well, we won't be doing it, but that's the story. The story is titled The Fisherman and His Wife. Well, I'm JD Adler. This has been Old Saul. I'll see you next time.